A smart home robot that had slept for 50 years was accidentally awakened by the new homeowners. She could not only help the owner with various household chores, but also play with the children. However, the mistress soon discovered that the robot seemed to exhibit aggressive behavior. Moreover, she looked exactly like the homeowner from 50 years ago. It was said that the entire family had died under mysterious circumstances. The robot was also present at the crime scene. A deadly game filled with hidden dangers began. Would the mistress be able to uncover the truth and protect her family? The main character Samira and her family of 4 moved into a historic suburban villa. The younger daughter Juno was full of curiosity about the new home. She chased after her brother Finn, running indoors to be the first to choose her favorite bedroom. Finn vanished in the blink of an eye. Juno had to wander around the house by herself. The villa was very luxurious. It even had an elevator inside. Juno took the elevator to the second floor and was startled by her brother suddenly appearing. Curiously, she asked, "Why are there TVs everywhere?" Samira told her daughter, "This is Germany's oldest smart home, which is connected to a supercomputer to help us with household chores. However, because of its age, it may have malfunctioned." Finn was most interested in the computer. He immediately went to the basement to look for the server and tried to wake up the sleeping smart butler, but the large antique computer left Finn completely baffled. He fumbled with the switches on top, but the machine showed no response. Finn heard his dad calling him upstairs and promptly left the basement. A red signal light was blinking. "Dad," David explained, "this smart system is at least 50 years old, so it definitely can't be restarted." The family was busy tidying up the clutter in the house. Finn discovered a robot in the workshop and immediately began to take it apart for research, but after reconnecting the wires, the robot still showed no response. As evening approached, the house was finally tidied up. Samira and her husband exchanged goodnights with their youngest daughter. From their conversation, it seemed that their move was somehow related to Juno. So even though Finn was reluctant to leave his friends, he had to comply for his sister's sake. In the deep of night, the family was fast asleep. Suddenly, the red robot activated. The square electronic screen lights up with its factory name OBB. Then a short-haired woman's face appeared. She activated the home's domestic system. The woman's face appeared on each screen. The red robot made its way to the pool area and spotted a mouse. Without hesitation, it trampled over it, leaving a shocking trail of blood. The red robot quickly entered Juno's room. The next moment, a girl's scream echoed. Samira and the others hurried over to check after hearing it. They then saw the eerie red robot. It introduced itself as the electronic household assistant Kaizen. It could operate the dishwasher and washing machine, provide heating for the room, and maintain a comfortable temperature. It would remind them to restock groceries in a timely manner. Juno found Kaizen very interesting and persuaded her mother to keep the robot. Kaizen was indeed very smart. In the morning, it would play music to wake its owners up. One morning, Samira noticed her daughter was missing and rushed to the window. She found Juno burying the dead mouse with Kaizen. Suddenly, a notification sound came from behind. Kaizen had already brewed coffee in the kitchen and prepared golden, crispy rolls. She easily won over the hearts of the family. One day, Samira prepared lunchboxes and watched her husband take the 2 kids to school. When she turned around, she was startled.
Bist du schon immer so groß?
Ich wollte nur deinen reizenden Kindern hinterher schauen. Aber dein breiter Kopf hat mir die Sicht versperrt.
Samira went to swim in the indoor pool alone, while Kaizen was responsible for clearing the weeds in the yard. However, she didn't avoid Juno's mouse grave.
Du bist gestürzt. Ein Krankenwagen wird gerufen.
Samira saw the stones on the ground and realized that Kaizen had brought the stones inside. David was very sorry after learning that his wife was hurt. It was he who instructed Kaizen to work on the lawn, but he hadn't properly checked the ground. At school, the teacher briefly introduced Finn to his classmates and specifically mentioned that he was an honor student before transferring. Finn awkwardly smiled, not wanting to attract negative attention on his first day of school. Suddenly, a late blonde boy walked in. He nodded to the teacher and sat next to Finn. He introduced himself as Steve. Finn was cheerful and outgoing, making it easy for him to make friends. But for his sister Juno, fitting into a new environment wasn't so simple. The teacher suggested that Juno join the school music club so she could make friends more quickly, while David and his wife were still worried about their youngest daughter. Steve had already nagged Finn to go home with him. Steve was clumsy and impolite. Kaizen frowned, clearly disliking this guest. Steve opened the fridge and looked inside. Besides juice, there were only sodas. He asked Finn, Don't you have any cocktails or something? Unexpectedly, Kazan suddenly interjected and guided the two to find the wine room downstairs. Even Finn didn't know this room existed. Soon after, Samira and her husband returned home with Juno. She was unsure whether to let her daughter join the club, because Juno's mental state was unstable, and her ability to handle stress was worse than that of her peers. Samira feared that joining the club might trigger panic attacks for her. Kazan eavesdropped on their conversation from the doorway, and then turned to find Juno to chat. She deliberately steered the conversation towards the club. Kazan activated the karaoke mode and sang and danced with Juno.
Du machst es so toll, meine Prinzessin. Du solltest auf jeden Fall in die Musik AG.
Danke.
Schade, dass deine Mama das nicht erlauben will. Sie glaubt, dass von deinem Gejaule die Milch sauer wird.
Juno was feeling down and remained gloomy. David didn't notice his daughter's unhappiness and kept praising Kazan for how quickly she peeled potatoes. Samira felt a bit worried hearing this. The robot had blades for cutting grass on the bottom, and its hands had a blender and a peeler. What if these sharp devices accidentally injure two children? Juno interrupted Samira's thoughts and proactively expressed her desire to join the music club.
Es soll noch im Dezember eine große Aufführung geben vor der ganzen Schule.
Ja und? Muss ja nicht kommen, wenn ich dir peinlich bin.
Samira hurried after her to apologize. Fortunately, Juno was easy to soothe and knew that her mother loved her very much. But Samira knew that with Juno's personality, she would never suggest joining the club on her own. Someone must have mentioned it to her. David stated that this matter had nothing to do with him. It was probably the teacher who had talked to Juno. Samira stopped thinking about it and continued tidying up the studio. She stumbled upon an old box filled with photos of the previous owners. Samira suddenly realized that the mistress in these photos seemed to be the prototype for Kazan. Kazan, seeing this familiar face, couldn't help but drift back several decades. She continued to browse the photo album after Samira left. A group photo of 4 people made Kazan's demeanor change instantly. She directly triggered the projector, igniting it. The flames quickly spread throughout the room. Samira and her husband were soon awakened by the fire alarm. They hurriedly took the children and escaped the house. Kazan activated the fire extinguishing system, promptly putting out the flames. Samira felt a pang of regret seeing the photos destroyed. She told her husband that she had seen Kazan's prototype. That family had once lived in this house. David didn't care about the photos. He believed the fire was caused by Samira's negligence. After all, she was the last one to leave. However, Samira was certain that she had turned off the projector before going to bed. She felt unhappy due to her husband's doubts. Just as she had left, Kazan began to twist the truth. She claimed that the cause of the fire was Samira bumping into the table, which caused the wine bottle to spill onto the running projector. The couple's relationship subtly began to strain. Samira had to get addicted to work and not let herself have wild thoughts. One day, her good friend Mina called. She asked Samira how she was adapting. From their conversation, it was clear that Samira's sister Casey had committed suicide. This had a severe impact on their family. Samira missed her sister very much, even though the two had fought since childhood, and Casey had often locked her in a cupboard, scaring her half to death. They would always be the closest of sisters. Kazan listened to the conversation thoughtfully. She deliberately mentioned that she couldn't get the potatoes from the storage and asked Samira for help. As soon as Samira walked into the storage, Kazan locked the door behind her. Samira was afraid of enclosed spaces. She desperately knocked on the door for help, but Kazan leisurely walked into the kitchen and began slicing bread with a sharp blade. Meanwhile, David was taking his son to school. He happened to run into Steve, who came over to say hello. It was then that he recognized David as a famous author, so he complained that Finn hadn't told him sooner. "My mom is a fan of your dad's books."
Achso, hast du meine...
Du sollst doch mal rüberschauen, ne? Nicht, dass sie merkt,
Dass ich das nicht selber gemacht habe. Ja. Geil, danke.
Clearly, Steve saw Finn as a tool for doing his homework. Finn was very angry when he realized this. As soon as school was over, he shook off Steve and left. The latter caught up and said that I deliberately kept my distance from you because I was afraid of others gossiping. This strongly implied that Finn's sexual orientation was somewhat unique. When David returned home, he found his wife locked in the storage. Samira was drenched in cold sweat and said that Kazan had deliberately locked her in there, but David said the door wasn't locked. Moreover, when I got back, Kazan said that something was wrong with you and even called for an ambulance. There must be some misunderstanding in this. After all, Kazan is just a computer program. How could it intentionally harm its owner? Samira wasn't convinced by her husband. She quietly called the real estate agent to learn more about Kazan. but the agent didn't know much either. He only mentioned that the original owner was named Horst. However, he had passed away a long time ago. The agent suggested that Samira could go to the city archives to look up information about Horst. Samira immediately went to the archives to check. Horst was the CEO of OBB. His wife's name was Kazan. The real Kazan died of an illness in December 1972. Shortly after, Horst also met with a fatal accident. Samira was busy researching the documents, while David was focused on writing his next novel. As for Finn and Steve, they reconciled and huddled in the bedroom doing their homework. Juno wanted to show off the dance she learned in the club, but no one paid her any attention. Only Kazan approached her voluntarily. She invited Juno to show off the new dance she had learned. When Samira returned home, she realized that Juno was feeling a bit upset, so she suggested that the family play a game together after dinner, to take the opportunity to strengthen their bond. Juno insisted on pulling Kazan into the game. The pleasant atmosphere of the game was shattered, because Kazan deliberately revealed that Samira had a panic attack today, which even caused an ambulance to come to the house. Moreover, Kazan privately fed Juno the idea that Samira's profession was just molding clay, and that it hardly counted as a job, earning very little. But in fact, Samira's income was no less than David's. The couple had an argument about whether to keep Kazan. In an attempt to convince her husband, Samira pulled him to a nearby forest. She pointed to 2 gravestones and explained that Kazan's prototype died in 1972. That same year, the house was remodeled into a smart home. However, a few months later, her husband and son were involved in a fatal car accident. According to newspapers from that time, the Kazan robot was also at the accident scene. No matter how you look at it, she seemed very suspicious, but David blamed his wife for being paranoid. He hoped that Samira could be more rational, so that they could maintain their family. Samira returned home dejected. She wanted to take a bath to relieve her tense nerves. Unexpectedly, Kazan suddenly barged in. She confessed that she had indeed lived here before, but Horst and Peter were forced to leave. She was powerless in that regard. Now, Finn, Juno, and David are Kazan's new family.
Du hast hier nichts mehr verloren. Hast du das gehört? Verschwinde aus meinem Haus!
What exactly happened in this house? In 1971, the male owner Horst was focused on his career. The family almost gave up their own identities for him. Kazan, who excelled in school, gave up her career to become a housewife. Peter, who hated soccer, was also placed on the team through Horst's connections. He was forced to choose a hobby he didn't like. Kazan noticed that her son was suffering, and promised him that she would talk to Horst, and let Peter choose what he wanted to do. However, during a laundry session, Kazan found lipstick stains on her husband's clothes, coupled with Horst's frequent late nights at work. When Kazan called him, she heard the voice of a new female secretary. A terrible suspicion began to creep into her mind. She suspected that her husband might be cheating. Kazan couldn't stop thinking about this until dinner time.
Hast du schon mit Papa gesprochen? Wegen Fußball.
Hör doch bitte einfach mal auf zu jammern und reiß dich zusammen. Und geht auch gemeinsam durch dunkle Zeiten. Wenn du willst, dass Papa wiederkommt, dann musst du besser sein als die anderen.
She had long forgotten her promise to her son. Kazan packed dinner and prepared to investigate her husband's company. Kazan approached the office door. That was making strange noises. Fortunately, the people inside were someone else. She hid in a nearby lab and happened to see her husband enter. Kazan handed him the food box and explained that she was there to deliver dinner. Horst wasn't suspicious and called for the female secretary to heat it up. When Kazan saw the secretary, who was big and burly, she finally felt relieved. On Friday, she and her husband met with familiar friends. These 2 friends were the other couple in the group photo. During the conversation at the dinner table, friend Jit revealed that she not only got a promotion, but was also pregnant. Horst's expression became tense. Unfortunately, Kazan was too immersed in her sadness to notice. She recalled the fetus that had died early before, and hid in the bathroom to ease her emotions. Jit kindly followed her to comfort Kazan, and encouraged her to return to work to distract herself. But Kazan was willing to sacrifice for her husband. Jit chose not to say more. She took out lipstick to help her touch up her makeup, but Kazan immediately recognized that the color code was the same as the one on her husband's clothes. It turned out that this person was right beside her. With these memories, the reflection came to a temporary halt. After threatening Samira, Kazan ran to remind David, "It seems your wife is having a panic attack." In this way, even if Samira clarified what had just happened, David would only think she was out of her mind, using a robot as a hypothetical enemy. However, in order to comfort his wife, David still had their son turn off the main server. Then he locked Kazan in the basement. But Juno was furious about this. She didn't want to lose Kazan as her good friend. Although David didn't say it out loud, he didn't really believe his wife's words deep down. Finn also thought that his mom might have had a nightmare, because Aunt Casey passed away. He had also experienced nightmares that were hard to distinguish from reality. In the end, Samira decided to restart the smart home system, and chose to seek psychological therapy. She didn't want to make the whole family unhappy. Because of herself, Kazan had already begun to covet David. Fortunately, she was just a robot, and didn't have a real human body. Through Samira's conversation with the psychologist, we learned the reason why the protagonist moved. It turned out that Casey had a mental illness. Samira kindly brought her sister home to care for her. However, Casey ultimately committed suicide in the kitchen. This scene left a serious psychological scar on the children. That's why Samira moved to this place, to distance herself from the house where death had occurred. Samira didn't mention anything about Kazan. To prevent the doctor from thinking she was crazy, she privately spoke to the robot, bluntly stating, "You're just a tin can. Don't even think about taking my family away."
Und glaubst du allen Ernstes, David wird dich jemals so lieben können wie mich? Schau dich an, Cassandra. Wer auch immer du mal gewesen bist, du bist es nicht mehr.
Kazan fell into memories upon hearing this. After she learned of her husband's infidelity, she deliberately pretended not to know, and even persuaded Horst to go watch Peter's game, hoping to use the child to maintain the family. Peter performed terribly during the game. Horst left in anger halfway through the game. Peter was very frustrated. Kazan went over to comfort her son. Unexpectedly, two players came over to invite Peter to a gathering at the garden shed. Peter hesitated and didn't want to go, but Kazan hoped her son could make friends, so she agreed for Peter to go. In the evening, Horst still hadn't returned home. Kazan called the office to inquire. She learned that he had left work long ago. Kazan hung up the phone, just in time to hear the sound of a car approaching. She went outside, and found her son being thrown out of a car by the players. He was covered in wounds. It turned out that the team had long been displeased with the connections, so they took the opportunity to rough Peter up. Kazan decided to conceal this matter from her husband. She wouldn't hold those people accountable either, because if the matter blew up, it would make the papers, and negatively impact Horst's company. The label of weakness would also stick with Peter for life. Kazan could only assure her son that time would heal everything. You don't have to go back to playing soccer anymore. But things didn't go according to her plan. The team members still wouldn't let Peter off the hook. This caused him to often daydream in class, and his grades to slip. One night, Peter didn't come down for dinner. Kazan went upstairs to find her son, but discovered his bedroom was empty. Moreover, the back window was open. Suddenly, there was a noise coming from downstairs. Kazan rushed down to check. To her shock, Peter was covered in blood and holding a handgun in his hand. He had killed the bullies. He wanted to prove that he wasn't a coward. Kazan struggled to remain calm. She burned the blood-stained clothes from her son. Then she drove to the crime scene. Kazan put on plastic gloves and took tools with her. She found the bodies of those children, and removed the bullets from their bodies. Then she set the garden shed on fire. Kazan resorted to extreme measures to protect her family. She still adhered to this principle even now. So Kazan began to deliberately get close to David. David was a crime and erotic novelist, who was quite proud of his work, but Samira had never liked the themes of his novels. Kazan began to praise David's abilities heavily.
Du hast einen der aufregendsten Charaktere geschaffen, den das Krimi-Genre zu bieten hat. Er ist kein Mensch aus Fleisch und Blut und trotzdem schafft er es, seine Leser zu berühren. Heißt das, ich könnte ebenfalls deine Fantasie anregen?
Samira was focused on accompanying her daughter, with warm embrace and kisses that Kazan couldn't do. Samira even suggested that the whole family go on a trip for Christmas. Juno was very excited. At this moment, she didn't care whether Kazan would be lonely. Just then, Finn stormed home in anger. He had been getting close to Steve lately, but Steve didn't want others to know about his sexual orientation, and had deliberately embarrassed Finn in front of friends. Samira rushed to comfort her son. Kazan took the opportunity to chat with Juno. The girl was about to participate in auditions for a club performance. She was worried that she wouldn't get the role she wanted. Kazan said she had a way to ensure that Juno would be chosen by the teacher, but she needed Juno to promise not to mention it to anyone.
Du musst dich ins Schlafzimmer deiner Eltern schleichen. Dort hat deine Mutter etwas versteckt, was seinen Auftritt unvergesslich machen wird. Die Überraschung befindet sich unter ihrem Bett.
While Kazan encouraged Juno to take risks, she was also monitoring the situation with Finn. Steve had come to apologize. His erratic attitude made Finn very upset. Kazan interjected, asking Steve to leave and not to bother Finn anymore. Steve reluctantly had to leave. However, Kazan didn't let it go easily. She followed Steve with a kitchen knife raised in her arm.
Was soll der Scheiß?
Lass Finn in Ruhe. Wehe, du kommst meinem Sohn noch einmal zu nahe.
Deinem Sohn.
Meanwhile, Samira discovered that the bed in the bedroom had been moved. As she was about to reposition the mattress, she found a photo of Kazan with Peter. In the picture, Kazan had a big belly. Could it be that she had another child? Samira was about to ask more questions when Kazan suddenly malfunctioned. The house lights flickered several times before returning to normal. The earlier questions were left unresolved. The next day, Juno went to participate in the auditions. When she sang the line "The hunter takes up his gun," she pulled out a gun that Kazan had hidden under the bed decades ago and pulled the trigger towards the audience. Fortunately, no classmates were harmed, but all the parents rushed to the school to hold someone accountable. The teacher also learned from Juno that the gun had been found under her mother's bed. The incident quickly attracted the attention of the police. They uncovered several weapons under the bedroom floorboards. Most of them were registered under Horst's name. The parents didn't care whose gun it was. They absolutely wouldn't allow the gun-wielding girl to continue attending classes with their children. Samira intervened to stop the parents' accusations. Her daughter wasn't the gun-wielding child. Both she and her husband were willing to take full responsibility for the matter. Samira candidly admitted, "In April this year, my sister committed suicide at home. Juno was the first to find the body, and it left her with a psychological scar." Fortunately, the new environment and school helped Juno gradually regain her confidence, so she pleaded with the parents to give Juno a chance. Juno didn't realize how dangerous the handgun was. She just wanted to perform the lyrics well, which is why she brought it to school. Fortunately, the parents were understanding and agreed to let Juno stay at school. David was very disappointed in Kazan this time. "You saw Juno go into the bedroom to get the gun. Why didn't you tell us?" Kazan defended herself, saying she only saw Juno crawling under the bed and didn't know she found a gun. Samira believed that Kazan had instructed her daughter to go into the bedroom for the gun. She was deliberately trying to sow discord among our family in order not to betray her friend. Juno said she accidentally discovered the gun. Samira was extremely anxious. She held her daughter tightly and kept pressing her with questions.
Juno bereitet mir Sorgen. Samira verhält sich ihr gegenüber sehr aufgebracht.
Cassandra hat dir die Waffe gezeigt. Jetzt zeig das doch einfach, Mensch.
David rushed in to take his daughter away. Seeing Samira's agitation, Kazan took the opportunity to say, "For the sake of our family, I am willing to close myself off for now, at least until Samira's treatment shows results." After saying that, Kazan closed the screen. In 1964, Peter was still a lovely boy. The family's life was happy and fulfilling. Horst often mocked his colleagues for having 5 daughters, and he couldn't stand Peter's love for skating, a sport that lacks masculinity. On Christmas Day, he gifted his son a complete set of soccer gear, hoping it would make him more masculine. Kazan noticed that Peter wasn't happy at all. She secretly gave him a brand new pair of skates. When Horst found out, he accused Kazan of being too indulgent with the child. "Peter is practically a sissy now," he said. From that moment on, Horst started considering having another child. Kazan soon became pregnant again. Horst had already chosen many names for a boy in advance.
Aber was, wenn es ein Mädchen wird?
Bitte nicht.
To ensure everything went perfectly, he took his wife to the company. They had the most advanced equipment to determine the fetus's gender. However, this machine was still in the experimental stage. Kazan couldn't help but push the equipment aside. Seeing that Horst was very angry, she knew that this time it was going to be a girl. Kazan was very happy, because she had always wanted a daughter. However, on a stormy night, Kazan suddenly started to bleed heavily. Immediately, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. Horst quickly took his wife and got her into the car. They hurriedly made their way to the hospital. However, a tree struck by lightning blocked their path. Horst had to let his wife lie in the bathtub. Then he called the doctor for help. They were unable to save the child. Although Juno could continue attending school, the other kids at school wouldn't play with her. The teacher told Samira that Mrs. Niles didn't allow her daughter Emily to get close to Juno. Emily was the most popular student there. Samira believed that if she could find a way to invite Emily over to play, it would help her daughter build a good relationship and solve the issue of isolation. Coincidentally, Niles was a fan of David's books, so Samira entrusted this matter to her husband. David went to Niles' bookstore to propose holding a book club there. However, Juno really needed companionship lately. Niles suggested that Emily could play with Juno. The next day, she brought her daughter over.
Komm rein, Süße.
Ja.
Komm.
Viel Spaß, Emmy.
Tschüss.
Meanwhile, Finn was anxiously searching for Steve. He had suddenly stopped coming to class. Finn ran to Steve's house to look for him. He heard Steve's father cursing and said he never wanted to see that son again. Finn kept dialing the phone. Finally, he got in touch with Steve. It turned out that Steve was hiding in an abandoned garden shed. The reason Steve couldn't be brave and be himself was because he had an abusive father. Finn was worried that Steve had nowhere to go and invited him to stay at his home. However, Steve suddenly scoffed and said, "Forget it. That day, your smart home came after me, saying you were its son, and it wouldn't let me get close to you." Samira was playing hide and seek with the two girls. Emily was unfamiliar with the place. She didn't know where to hide. Suddenly, the kitchen oven made a noise. She smiled and climbed into the large oven. Meanwhile, Juno hid in the laundry basket. As she was about to close the basket, she inadvertently saw Kazan's screen flicker. At this moment, Samira was counting down. As soon as she entered the kitchen, she saw the disassembled oven racks and effortlessly found Emily. But the oven door wouldn't open, and the temperature inside was rising higher and higher. Finally, the fire department arrived in time to rescue Emily, but the girl was in shock due to second-degree burns. The police believed that Samira had been negligent in supervision, considering her unstable mental state. The doctor recommended that Samira be hospitalized for observation. This was also for the sake of the two children. Before being hospitalized, Samira secretly gave Juno a mobile phone and told her to contact her in case of any emergencies. In the evening, the family had dinner together.
Was ist, wenn das mit dem Ofen nicht Mama, sondern Cassandra war?
Wie kommst du jetzt da drauf?
Ich habe sie gesehen, an dem Tag, als Emily hier war.
David remarked that it must have been your imagination. Isn't Kazan already turned off? Finn couldn't help but tell his father about the things Steve mentioned. Kazan's behavior was indeed very strange, but David had never liked Steve. He thought that kid was just talking nonsense. Finn was about to leave the dinner table when Kazan rushed in and ordered him to finish his meal. She then shut the dining room door.
Und endlich sind wir auch eine richtige Familie.
The entire house was sealed off by Kazan. David found that the door was locked down. The landline in the house had also been cut. They had a habit of not using their phones during mealtime. David had to rummage through drawers to find something to open the door. Kazan threatened that if he didn't sit back down and let her finish, the situation would become very awkward.
Was willst du von uns?
Ich bin euch wohl einige Antworten schuldig.
In 1972, 3 boys mysteriously died on the team, so the school organized a charity game to commemorate their contributions. At such a time, Peter definitely couldn't drop out of the game. Kazan and her husband went to watch the game live. Gita also brought her newborn to join the excitement. Since Peter killed those 3 people, his behavior became extremely aggressive. He recklessly tackled others and committed fouls on the field. Kazan ran up to question her son.
Was ist los mit dir? So kenne ich dich überhaupt nicht.
Das wolltest du doch, oder nicht? Das ist nicht mehr anstrengend.
Peter hated his mother for breaking her promise and not letting him leave the team. So that night, he didn't stay home for dinner. He claimed he was going out to meet a girl. The bread in the oven was freshly baked, but only Kazan was home. She carried the food upstairs. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her body. Kazan immediately called Gita. She didn't want to beat around the bush. She bluntly said, "I know you're with Horst. Hurry up and give him the phone." Horst pulled back the curtains and saw Kazan in the phone booth by the roadside. He hurriedly got dressed and went downstairs. Horst wanted to find some excuses for his infidelity. Kazan interrupted Horst's lame excuses and said, "I'm not here for that. We need to go to the hospital." After a full examination, the doctor pointed out that Kazan had cancer, and it had spread to all her organs. Surgical intervention wouldn't be effective. This unfathomable rate of spread was something the doctor had never encountered before. He couldn't help but ask Kazan, "Have you been exposed to any type of radiation recently?" Kazan immediately thought of the machine used to test the baby's gender. In a fit of anger, she stormed out. Horst ran after her to explain, "I didn't know there was a problem with that machine, and being with Gita was just a moment of passion." His shameless demeanor was disgusting. Kazan was completely disappointed in her husband. She only hoped that in her lifetime, she could still help her son, who was in deep trouble. Late at night, Peter stumbled home drunk. Kazan made him a drink to help sober him up. She wanted to talk to him about that girl. Peter described her in glowing terms, but Kazan knew her son was lying. He had simply run away alone to drink and drown his sorrows by the roadside. Peter wanted to escape this suffocating home. Kazan didn't want to hide her illness from her son, so she honestly told him that her health was in terrible shape. When Peter heard that his mother was also leaving, he ran out of the house, heartbroken. After hesitating, Kazan woke her sleeping husband. She knew that there was a halted human experiment in her husband's lab. Although cancer could attack and destroy human cells, it couldn't crush consciousness, thoughts, and feelings. So as long as these elements were extracted and stored on an electronic hard drive, a person could completely escape death. Kazan willingly became her husband's test subject in order to stay with her son as he grew up. 2 months later, Horst renovated the house. He installed computer screens in every room and brought a massive server into the basement. Kazan noticed that the server had a master switch and realized that others could easily shut her down. She questioned her husband's assistant. What happened to that vector ultrasound machine? The assistant replied that it had been long discontinued. Now everyone used ultrasound for prenatal checks. Kazan approached the assistant and asked him, "Did you know all along that the radiation from that machine could harm the fetus and that it could lead to my cancer?"
Es tut mir leid.
Sie können es wieder gut machen.
Kazan had the assistant make some modifications to the server. She was scheduled for a modification surgery the next day, because Horst said they needed to act. While the brain cells were still very active, Peter wanted to convince his mother, "You don't have to do this for me." But Kazan was determined. She sat down in the surgical chair. A huge probe pierced the back of her head. Her past life flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. When she woke up, she had become the intelligent robot Kazan. Her body and vision had undergone a dramatic transformation. Peter couldn't accept his mother's current appearance. He unzipped the body bag and saw a grotesque corpse inside. That was the last time he saw Kazan as a human. From then on, Peter became despondent. Upon hearing this, David felt his worldview shatter. He picked up a stool from the ground and aimed to smash this monstrous robot. Kazan was hit hard and fell into a temporary malfunction. Finn hurriedly took her sister out of the restaurant, but David was trapped in place by Kazan. He warned her not to act recklessly, only to have Kazan sever his fingers. The robots locked them in separate rooms, and all their phones were confiscated. Only then did David realize that his wife wasn't lying. The accident involving Horst and Peter might have also been orchestrated by Kazan, and Kazan's story was certainly not over yet. Aside from Peter's difficulty in accepting her appearance, Horst also began to get tired of the renovated Kazan, because every move she made was being monitored. It felt like being imprisoned at home. One day, Horst rushed to the basement to shut down the server. Peter tried to stop his father, but unexpectedly, he brought Jit to the house. It turned out their scandal had been exposed. Jit had already been kicked out by her husband.
Nicht unser Problem, du kannst doch nicht einfach irgendeine andere Frau hier reinlassen.
Ist nicht irgendeine andere Frau, Peter. Thomas ist mein Sohn.
After Horst put his son to sleep, he left the bedroom. Kazan had overheard everything he said, thanks to the assistant's help. No one except Kazan could shut her down. Downstairs, Jit was completely unaware, acting as if she were the lady of the house. She was about to get food from the oven, when her necklace suddenly got caught, burning half of her face and leaving it disfigured. Kazan took advantage of the chaos and pushed the baby stroller downstairs. Fortunately, Peter caught the carriage in time, preventing a disaster. Seeing that Kazan had not shut down, Horst was filled with dread. He hurriedly led his family to escape the villa. Peter didn't want to leave his mother behind and urged his father to stop the car. However, Horst ignored his plea. Peter decided to jump from the car. Horst immediately reached out to stop his son. He crashed into a tree by the roadside. By the time Kazan caught up, the two were already unconscious, their lives hanging in the balance. Kazan broke down and screamed, and in the next moment, she shut down. In the vast house, only the oven continued to flicker. A blonde girl was repeatedly flipping the circuit breaker. She resembled a monster. It turned out that the irradiated baby had not died. She was merely ugly and unlike other people. Horst wouldn't allow such a monster to ruin his reputation. He decided to hide his daughter away and not let anyone know of her existence. Christmas was just around the corner. Samira mustered the courage to contact her husband, asking when he would come to see her. David said he couldn't go to the hospital recently, as he had taken the two kids on a trip. David didn't want to deceive Samira either, but Kazan was threatening him with an iron. Finn, unlike her father, didn't sit idly by. Instead, she pretended to want to ease relations, and pleaded with Kazan to let her go buy a Christmas tree. If she didn't properly soothe Juno, she would never forget her biological mother. Kazan found this reasonable, but she refused to let Finn go. Instead, she used Faye's life as leverage, and demanded that David bring back the tree within an hour. The latter rushed out to buy a Christmas tree. He accidentally ran into Niles, and hurriedly explained to him, that the one who harmed his daughter was their family's smart robot, and that she had confiscated his phone, placing him and his family under house arrest. David begged Niles to help him call the police, and warned the police not to ring the doorbell casually. Niles thought David was acting crazy, and got into her car and drove off. It was unclear whether she had taken it to heart. Juno hid in the closet, repeatedly trying to contact her mother with a hidden phone. However, the psychiatric hospital confiscated all patients' communication tools. Just as Juno was about to send her mother a text explaining the situation, Kasim suddenly pulled open the cabinet. Fortunately, Juno reacted quickly, and didn't reveal the phone's existence. Okay. Juno pretended to be happy and sang karaoke with Kasim. Meanwhile, Samira secretly took the nurse's keys, and ran to the storage locker to retrieve her phone. At a critical moment, the phone was dead. After finally charging it, the missed calls from her daughter flooded the notification bar. Samira quickly returned the call to Juno. However, as soon as the ringtone sounded, Kasim discovered the phone. Samira couldn't get through on the call, and had to go find the nurse with the phone. She showed her the long list of missed calls, and expressed her concern for her daughter. The nurse understood her feelings as a mother, and used the hospital's phone to call David. However, the call didn't go through. At this moment, Juno called in to explain that she just wanted to wish her mother a Merry Christmas. After all, Kasim was pointing a weapon at her head, and Juno dared not disobey the order.
Wenn ich zu euch kommen soll, musst du das einfach nur sagen. Ich bin sofort da.
Nein, wir sind im Urlaub.
Not long after, David returned with the Christmas tree. Kasim had prepared the Christmas dinner to enjoy with the family. Unexpectedly, Steve suddenly showed up at the door. Kasim pressed her hand on Juno, and threatened Finn to quickly get rid of Steve. Considering her sister's safety, Finn had to comply. Fortunately, Samira had not given up hope. She took advantage of the nurse's distraction to sneak out of the hospital. The hospital quickly contacted David to inform him of the details. When Kasim learned that Samira had escaped, she realized that Samira would definitely return to cause trouble, so she instructed David to kill Samira.
Kannst du mich nicht zwingen, die Mutter meiner eigenen Kinder umzubringen?
Ach nein?
Kasim warned David, "I won't harm the children in the slightest, but you are just a disposable character. If you are of no value, you will be discarded." Meanwhile, Samira broke the basement glass, and quietly slipped into the villa. David downed a glass of whiskey, and grabbed a weapon to head upstairs. Kasim intentionally let the children see the scene, making them witness their father trying to kill their mother. The two fell to the ground, fighting to the death. Samira grabbed a picture frame, and knocked her husband down. Then she hid in the bedroom closet. However, David soon pursued her. He kept explaining that he was forced into the situation. As he was about to approach the closet, Samira unexpectedly discovered a hidden door. This was the bedroom of the irradiated girl. Due to the age of the place, rats were scurrying around. Kasim shoved the obstructing David aside, and rushed into the hidden door, stabbing Samira. She warned her not to enter that room. Samira covered her wound and crawled forward, unexpectedly seeing the body of the girl. She noticed the picture frame on the table, and guessed that this body was Kasim's daughter. Samira questioned what was happening. It turned out that before the accident happened, Horst, appealing to emotions and reason, had convinced Kasim to let them go. He said that their son shouldn't grow up in such an environment. As long as Peter saw you like this, he would never escape the shadow of losing his mother.
Wenn du uns wirklich liebst, dann lass uns gehen.
Ihr müsst mir versprechen, Maggie mitzunehmen. Sie hat ein besseres Leben verdient. Besser als das hier.
Horst pretended to agree to her request. He told Kasim to go upstairs and bring Maggie down. As soon as Kasim entered the room, she was locked inside. Horst took the opportunity to escape in his car. Then a car accident occurred, resulting in his unexpected death. Kasim had only wanted to protect the two children all along. Samira seized on this point, and tried to persuade Kasim to spare her life. She urged her not to let Juno and Finn lose their mother, like those two poor children. After hearing this, Kasim finally decided to withdraw from the family. She also reminded Samira that David wasn't someone to be trusted. "I told him I wouldn't harm the children." Samira rushed out and embraced the children.
Ich ließ mir keine andere Wahl. Ich wollte nur beschützen. Sie hätte euch sonst wehgetan.
Samira didn't believe her husband's lies. She smelled the scent of a gas leak, and hurriedly took the children away. The villa exploded behind them. Kasim remained forever by her daughter's side, and so the story comes to an end. Although the themes are somewhat different, it's similar to the stories of Orphan and Megan. They all tell the tale of a family torn apart by an outsider. Fathers are always the most easily deceived characters in such films. In almost every film, the female lead is sent to a psychiatric hospital by her husband. The plot and setting are quite interesting, but one shouldn't delve too deeply into the logic. Those who don't know might think that calling the police is illegal abroad. Everyone seems to want to solve problems on their own. The police appear to be virtually non-existent. Fortunately, the two female characters are well developed, and the story feels complete.